There we go.
Hi, everybody. It's Dale Walsh, the poetic warrior of the mental health warriors, and welcome to the latest edition of Straight, Sane, and Sober. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to have you attending. And today, our guest, my guest, is Max Guttman, who's a licensed certified social worker, and he's basically in business for himself, right, Max?
Correct.
So he
Correct.
has his own practice, and we're going to talk to him about his mental health journey, and it should be very interesting. So let me do the intro, and then we'll get right down to it. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. And Max, how are you? How's everything today?
Everything's great. Thank you for asking. It's a
Well,
pleasure to be here.
it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion, but a good conversation. And Adam Duvall, the founder of the Mental Health Warriors, say I should say conversation instead of discussion. But let me start with a poem. I picked one out from my book, Seraphim on the Cusp of Spring, which is available at Amazon. And you put in poetry collections by D.E. Walsh, and I actually have 5 collections that I've published. So this one is called When You Enter My Thoughts. The choice is simple. Give up my raceful ways or risk absolute rejection by the only female who will ultimately matter to me while I pursue vitality in this myopic existence. When the years slide like waves upon the sand and into the ocean, a precarious life which guarantees nothing but the sunrise at dawn and sunset at dusk, pulling us into the mystery of shy night as the stars show themselves in subtly modest light to them sight into the workings of the world.
Beautiful. Really beautiful.
Thank you. So welcome, Max. Why don't we just get right down to it, and why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and your journey? It's been a very admirable journey, and I'd love to hear about it.
Sure. So I guess my journey with mental health began in really high school. I had suffered from anxiety and depression. I was hospitalized a few times. I attempted suicide. As severe and difficult as that sounds, my journey really began in my last semester of college, where I had a quote break from, let's call it first episode psychosis, call it schizophrenia. I lost connection with reality. Everything became very confusing, very difficult. I wasn't able to relate with people. I wasn't able to understand the world around me. And that happened over the course of 6 months over the last semester, right before I was supposed to graduate. And I did graduate, but instead of being able to attend graduation, I was admitted to a hospital, a community hospital, and then later to a state hospital because they weren't able to resolve what was going on with me there, or help me. So they kicked me up to the higher level of care, the highest level of care. And after about 6 months of intense mental health treatment at that level, I was able to recover enough to come back home. So I was discharged to my family back home in Westchester, and I was in school in upstate New York. So I basically went back to live with my family over the course of a year of getting intramuscular injections and going to weekly therapy. I recovered enough where I could attend, do basically take care of myself enough to live under the supervision of my parents. So I was able to feed myself, get out of bed for a couple hours a day. And eventually I said to myself, I want to go back to school. I wanted to go to grad school. That was the dream and the hope that I had before I got sick. So I went to community college to sort of get used to the idea of being in a classroom again, basically going to a school locally to be used to sitting around students doing work. And then after I got a paralegal certificate, I applied back to grad school up in Binghamton, and I went back for my master's in social work. And I graduated. I got my MSW, and then I started practicing as a social worker in Westchester here. And then practice makes perfect. And eventually I got a higher level of clinical license and started practicing independently. And then I got a private practice, and I done advocacy, writing, research along the way, connecting with other peers, being a part of the peer community. And actually I identify as a prosumer, someone with lived experience and who is also a professional in mental health. So a prosumer. And a lot of my work and research and belief in how to relate to other people with a mental health disorder comes from that stance. So if that makes any sense, I'm sure it does to you, Dale.
It does make a lot of sense, and thank you very much for that. I just had like a couple of questions. So
Yeah.
you said basically that you didn't graduate, you didn't go to graduation because you were in the hospital for a
Yeah.
psychotic break, right?
Yes. But I did graduate. When I got home from the hospital, coincidentally, the day I got home after that 6 months, at the end, my diploma, was waiting for me in the mail. I
Great.
guess my parents never had opened it. They didn't feel right opening it in the mail without me there, and I came home and long 3-hour ride home. Not having been in my parents' house for a very long time, and I opened the mail. I'm like, oh my god, I graduated, Mom, Dad, look, because it was very unclear. I was so sick, and I wasn't able to even tell my parents. They were asking me, Max, are you gonna graduate? Are you leaving? Are you what? Are you doing this? And I didn't know what to tell them, and I couldn't really speak because my language was all was I was losing my speech, so I couldn't even
Right.
communicate with them if I was planning on graduating, if I was not, if I was this, I was that, and I was taking all these graduate courses, and there was a lot of confusion around my graduate status. So when I saw it in the mail when I got home, it was a relief because after I got home, I did not want to go right back. I needed to recover, and I needed at least a year. I need at least a year out of the hospital before I felt comfortable ever going back there.
Well, actually, I was in a bit a similar situation because I had a break at Dartmouth and in '75 in summer '75, and
Yeah.
they Dartmouth said I found this out after they put me in after my parents had hospitalized me and everything, and I was back at their apartment in New York, and basically I wanted to go back to Dartmouth, and they told me Dartmouth said because of the nature of how I left that I couldn't come back for a year. So what happened was I wanted to go down to Oklahoma City and work sewer pipelining and go back to Dartmouth because I love Dartmouth, but my parents and my family we really wanted me to come out to this program, residential program and a psychiatric residential program in New Jersey, which I've done, and obviously it changed my life because I've been 47 years in New Jersey now, and so
It
you
is a great
said that
state.
you what?
It is a great state, Dale. The
It
state of New
is.
Jersey.
I know. I'm proud to be from Jersey.
Yeah,
So
that would be too.
so you said you were losing your ability to speak. So
Yeah.
tell us about that. Was it just your thoughts were disorganized, or
Oh,
what?
over the course of 6 months of that last semester, it went from slight confusion, it went from slight disconnect to, what I was thinking and what was happening to complete ability to even really even speak a complete sentence coherently. I had words, increasing amounts of they call it word salad, you know, apple, potato, banana salad, you know, as opposed to I want to go and brush my teeth, potato, pancake. You know, it didn't make sense.
Right.
I wasn't able to communicate, and I lost my speech. I didn't know what was going on around me. I thought that by the end of the semester, I thought I was in a, you know, an FBI, CIA sort of, you know, I thought I was in the witness protection program overseen by the CIA. The house I was living in was operated by a Belgium spy because I had someone living from Belgium, but I thought the Belgium government was involved. It was a whole thing, and you know, it just got more and more complex and intricate and scary as time went on. You know.
So what led? I know you were in the hospital and everything, but with me it was like a major event when my delusion was destroyed. It was basically I saw the world incinerated in a thermonuclear holocaust. So that basically is what ended my delusion. What about you? When you know how did your delusion end? That you were, I mean, was it persecutory, or did you think that the CIA and the FBI were on your side, or what?
Well, there was the CIA, there was the FBI. They were on my side at times, not on my side at others. The English department, which I was going to school with, was involved too. Every professor was on in this trial where they were determining my whether or not I would continue on as a student or not, and the CIA was trying to figure out how I would either get back into school or not, and the FBI was involved too. But also to make things to make matters worse, towards the end, they were trying to enter my home. Since they controlled the home, they were I started to hear speakers from outside all around me. This is the city of Binghamton. We are going to enter your home by force. We are going to enter your home by force. And like I would hear it in my head, and I would hear I start to hear people, like people in my life, talking to the CIA, and the CIA was talking to them, and then they were telling me what to do. So eventually, I thought a bomb was going to go off in the house, you know, and I ran outside naked, you know, you know, and I think no one caught that. I was able to get back inside, but eventually, they told me to go outside and throw a rock through my car window, because that would help in whatever situation was happening. So I threw a rock in there. I climbed in, then I threw a rock through the other side, and then the police came and they took me away. So you know, they took me to the hospital.
That's I'm just fascinated by how you graduated, because you said that like that you know that the symptomology was like escalating all through your senior year. Was it
Yeah,
your entire senior year, your last like
yeah,
semester, or what?
yeah. The last semester. The semester so you know, towards the end of college, my friends started to graduate. They were all a year older than me, and I really wanted to not be left by myself in college. I didn't feel I was capable of taking care of myself, even really before I got sick.
Right.
You know, and so I started taking more and more classes. So I took a full summer. I took a summer session, which is very intense. Full summer session, 2 sessions. It did all got great grades. Then I took a very heavy fall semester. Then I took a winter session with 19 credits, because I thought that if I take all these credits during the winter, maybe I could apply to grad school and all this stuff and whatever. And during the winter, that winter, right before the last semester, I think is when I think that's when the break, you know, took place. I
Really
think
kicked it.
the stress, the enormity of the stress on my mind. I was awake at all hours a day, trying to do all these credits. And between the stress and all the work I was doing and my predisposition to schizophrenia, since I have family members who also have mental health issues and schizophrenia. They're both passed now, but I had an aunt and uncle, paternal, that were both had, both lived and passed away with schizophrenia, and everything was at work. It was all the factors were ripe for my break, and it happened. And during that last semester, after the winter, it sped out. It sped out of control. Between my mood, becoming more and more euphoric and grandiose, and the delusional thinking, and the paranoia, and all the distorted thoughts. By the end of the semester, I was gone. I was driving a car, patrolling around town. I didn't have enough money to pay for gas, so I parked it and was taking the bus. All sorts of, and I was working for a doc. I was doing lawn. I was working on people's lawns to try to collect a little bit of money because I lost contact with my family. But Dale, to answer your question, the reason why I graduated was because I had so many extra credits, because I was trying to, at the end, take all these credits. I had a lot of extra credits, and I'm fairly bright and capable. So it didn't really matter what was going on that last semester. I was going to graduate before. I just never applied for graduation.
Oh, okay. So if you screwed up those last courses, it didn't matter because you already had enough.
I was just yeah.
Okay. Well, I love your insight, Max. You really like you're aware, and I in my coaching business, my goal is to like help people become aware, not only those affected by the illness but also their family members. And
absolutely,
you have great awareness, and so you must know what agnosignosia is, right?
Yes. And it's funny you mentioned that. So that is, for I guess, for folks that don't know, it's a lack of insight or awareness into your health condition, or with schizophrenia, your schizophrenia symptoms. So people that suffer from that, if I don't want to take away your mantra on that, but it's people who are, people like myself, who basically are unaware, they'd be unaware of what's going on with them, what's wrong. So if I have a lack of insight into how to take care of myself, that would be the anosognosia. Max doesn't, he's not aware that he's not brushing his teeth, or he's not aware that he can't work a job, and all that stuff. But I want to talk about that for a second, because I read something that Pat Deegan wrote the other day on Facebook, a comment. She wrote that, she doesn't really agree with that word, because she feels that, look at all the stuff she can do, but for a lot of people out there, that's not true. Most people who truly are in line with the diagnosis, okay, clinical diagnosis, don't have that insight into their illness. And I think, as a clinician and someone who understands how neurobiology works, this more severe the break, the earlier on, the less time you spend in recovery, the less insight you're going to have, the more damaged the neurological apparatuses are in the brain. So yes, it's not true for everybody. Some people like me have more insight because I went into recovery earlier, I got treatment earlier on, and the damage to my brain was less significant. So I'm gonna have more insight. But if you look at people out there, most people who aren't connected to a service, or a hospital, or keep relapsing, their mind's gonna be a little bit more messed up. They're gonna have less insight, and it's going to be more difficult for them to control or manage their symptoms. Does that make sense, Dale?
Absolutely. And I just like to comment on my own history. I mean, what you brought up about that comment on Facebook is real relevant, because I could write poetry. I wrote 6 novels and everything, but I was still like totally delusional. I mean, I still thought I was God, and as I say, that was the lack of insight. It was like, I mean, just because I'm writing poetry and even going to school and everything doesn't mean that I wasn't in agnosignosia, because it was only as I say, a pivotal event in my life when I was 29 years old. It really made me realize how sick I really was, and I feel that's really when my recovery began. And ultimately, I had to lose my Dale personality in order to recover because Dale was like the I mean I won't go into like the multiple versus schizophrenic debate, but
Okay, okay.
basically I have I had five personalities, and Dale was the one that had to take the hit, and when Dale was gone, my other personalities like compensated and came to the rescue of the body. But ultimately, it took me as Dale 31 years of being in a void to be able to come back and be a healthy person. And the 31 years when I was getting healthy, I was Dewey Duck, So,
Mm-hmm.
but the anosognosia is, I mean, it's a bitch because, people don't realize, if you don't realize and you don't have awareness that you're sick, then it's very hard to recover.
It's very hard. Of course, it's hard to manage on a day to day if you don't realize how your symptoms are impacting your life. You know, and it's hard to get any real traction in your recovery. You're going to relapse more often. You're going to be you're going to lose that momentum. That people have, or they benefit from being stable for over a long term. When you're stable for longer, it's easier to recover if you relapse or you have a setback, as opposed to being in crisis every day. It's just how it works, right? You know,
Right.
so but I could definitely relate with that.
I've been hospitalized 15 times. The last two times I don't count because they weren't psychotic episodes. They were like problems with my
Yeah,
medication and everything.
right.
But basically, from 1975 to 1993, I was hospitalized 13 times. And
Yeah,
I meant, people can say you're psychotic, and you can be as psychotic as a Daffy Duck, and not know it. And if you don't have the insight, then you go to the hospital and it's all a game, and that's what I made it, And
yeah.
actually, my last five hospitalizations were hospitalizations because I put myself in the hospital because I had the insight to know I was psychotic.
Right, right. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful that you were able to get the help you needed when you needed the help, and you knew it. Not everyone does. And I work with a lot of people, especially when I work for an ACT team, assertive community treatment, with adults, as a social worker. I saw a lot of people who didn't have any insight, no insight whatsoever. And the hospitalizations were violent, to either get, you know, the process of hospitalization was violent. So, people taking out of their homes in handcuffs, because the police had to storm their apartment with a shield, whatever the situation was, because people will defend themselves. It's a survival instinct,
Right.
they may need to be in the hospital, but if they see police threatening their home environment, they don't know what the hell's happening. They will defend
Right.
their apartment and their living space till the end, because that's what people will do who feel threatened. Little they don't know though that they're sick. So that's the difficult piece that you have to negotiate as a worker, and the sad reality of someone that feels their life is threatened. So it's very sad. It's very difficult. It's very difficult for people that don't have the awareness piece. And it's not easy to cultivate it either. As you've discovered in your own life, it took a long time to really develop the insight, I'm sure, right?
It did, and one thing that I wanted to ask you about, I mean, because I have so few people I can ask this about, but as a coach, I feel that I'm on the other side of my psychosis and my mental illness, but and I'm working as a coach, but and what I bring to my coaching is my history of psychosis and knowing the illness, but I would just like I'd just like you to like talk about like the difference or the contrast between being a I hate this word patient, or I call it diagnosee or whatever,
Okay.
but being a patient and being an actual clinical worker. I mean, what insight can you give us? Because you're pretty much in a unique position that, so far as I've seen, and that you're recovered enough. You've got the training, And what is, what's the major difference you've seen between being a patient and a clinician?
Well, that's why I tried to like put myself in this prosumer category because there's being the patient, right, where you're the service recipient or whatever you want to call it, recipient of mental health treatment, consumer. There's a lot of words out there. Depending on who you are, you'll choose one. But I think when you're just one thing, or you're between two worlds, right? The being a consider yourself a patient and not quite the patient or the professional. You're stuck in this in between land. It doesn't work. You have to be something. I think in the mental health community, when you have multiple identities, some people get a little confused. When you're working with people, I don't understand. Are you this, are you that? People want to hear you're something. They don't want to hear you're this and you're that, and fragmented and unclear about who you are and what you are doing. Because in mental health, we have to be very clear about who we are, our role and our responsibility. Because especially if you're paranoid or you're confused, you want to know who you're working with. Well, are you a
Right,
patient or are you a professional? Which is it? You know what I mean? People
right,
sometimes really they need to know. It's not like socialization where we're out there in the world being this or that. And professionally, you really need to be something. And I choose this role as prosumer, being both, a patient and a professional, because it puts me in a unique position where I could bring the insight of what it's like to live day to day with an illness, but also have the professional skills and the knowledge of how to help people professionally. And I think it brings some authenticity into the work too. You have a lot of professionals out there who never broke a nail, never late, never sick, never this, never that. Well, that's bullshit. You're all of that. You've done all that. You were probably late today, but you won't admit it because you're a professional, right? You know what I mean? And in this professional mental health world, they don't have mental health issues. No one has any anxiety. No one ever gets stressed. No one's ever this. That's bullshit. Sorry for lack. I don't know. Sorry. But I'm trying to say, if you're authentic and yeah, sure, I sleep late from time to time. I was sick last week on your show, right? I had a migraine. I couldn't make it in. Okay. And I'm not ashamed to say that sometimes I don't feel well. Sometimes I get stressed. And I bring that humility into my practice because people generally want to hear from someone that has lived through it. Yeah, I know what it's like to have some anxiety, but here's what you do to manage it. And this is what I've learned professionally on what works for me or maybe works for other people. And I think that when people hear it from the horse's mouth, as they say, they're more apt to listen and buy into whatever you're saying, you know, because if you're
right.
just a professional, sometimes people are like, well, he don't know what it's like. He doesn't know what it's like. Yeah, I know what it's like. Yeah, sure I do. And this is what I did when I was there to get better. Or this is what other people do. And ironically, Dale, when I was at the hospital, in the state hospital, um, they take pictures of you and like they put it on your door. So for some reason, there was a donkey and they put my picture in the horse's thing, like right, in the middle of it. And the doctor pointed and go, "What do you think of this?" And looking at it, it's like a picture of me and a donkey. And I'm like, he goes, "Right from the horse's mouth, huh? Right, Max?" And I'm like, I'm just gonna keep quiet here. I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not nothing. I understand the expression, it's metaphor, but that's a little weird. So I kept it there, and it's like, what do I do with that? What do you do with some information? Um, we try to make the most of it. I'm sure you've been in the hospital and people say things that don't quite make sense, or you're too sick to benefit from something. Either way, I think in life we take what we can, we do what we can when we feel okay, and we move it along, and that's our journey.
So you really branched out. You have you written 4 books. I guess they're all autobiographical,
They are
biographical,
they
and
are
you also have. mental health affairs, right? Which is
I
like,
yeah.
how often does that come out?
Oh well, so I have like you said, I have my autobiographies under the name J. Peters, pen name. They're all standalone autobiographies. So it's a series. Yes, some are earlier on in my life than others, but each book is its own thing. That's the beauty of it, I think. I was told when writing them by one of my mentors, they've got to stand on their own. All right. People shouldn't have to read one to read the other, and you don't have to, but it sure is great if you read them all because they walk into each other. The last scene in each one prior to it, like the last scene
Right,
and the one before, they walk into each other. So you
right.
so like almost like Star Wars, but for mentally ill people and autobiographies. Um, but I also have a blog. It's called Mental Health Affairs at mentalhealthaffairs.blog. It's all about this being a prosumer, the prosumer identity. At the root of it, though, it's about reclaiming language because I believe in mental health as all other things, and I studied language before I got sick. The only way to really change and empower people and change the mental health system and change the way we think about things is through words and through language. So my blog is really deep and heavy into reshaping the mental health system by taking words that have been historically used to shame and disparage um,
Create guilt.
yeah, create guilt and all that negative shit that comes with mental health and reclaim it and make it more positive and uplifting and a source of pride and respect for people with mental health disorders.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what we're here for, is the mental health warriors, is to fighting to end the stigma. And so, uh, do you have like one or two like great insights, or like significant insights that you've come up since you've started working on the other side as a prosumer and a professional, that about your illness and about illness in general, that you didn't have before?
Well, I have you have these insights sort of every day. So when you're like, I'm sure you've experienced it to all of us that live with a mental health disorder, and sort of work in the field, when you're practicing and you're in session or you're talking to someone, and you're working through an insight or looking at a problem, you sort of realize how human you are, and how human mental health is. We take these words like mental health and medical and
Well, even the labels themselves, right, Max? Like
the
schizophrenic, bipolar,
schizophrenic,
major
bipolar,
depression.
any of these diagnostic terms, and they become so cold and so different. It's like they become their own thing. But the reality is I like to think of symptoms. I like to think of issues, of problems. We all have stuff, and these stuff are made up of little symptoms, right? Little tiny issues, right? And every day we may have some more than others, and maybe some days I have a little bit more anxiety than depression, or maybe you're a little bit more sad than upset, or maybe and every day we all have stuff, and that's what makes us human. And it's okay to say I'm a little sad, and it's okay to say I'm a little anxious, because when we're open to the fact that we've got something wrong with us, we're more apt to resolve it, and for it to be upfront and a priority in our recovery.
Well, that dovetails right into what we were saying earlier about insight and awareness about your illness. So,
Yeah.
um, tell us a little bit more about your books. You say you have four, and or I mean, basically, what I figure, what I've always been told is an autobiography is a complete life, whereas like memoirs are what is like episodic things in your life, or and you can have a series of memoirs to like add up to an autobiography. But would
Okay.
you say your books would you say your books are memoirs or autobiographies more?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's a tough one because like I'll give you an example. So like University on Watch, my first book, okay, is about my experience in college, but it reads like creative fiction. It's a story. There are characters. It's and it doesn't quite hold to I did this, then I did that, then I did this. I'll use different literary devices. It gets abstract. It reads like a book that you like Catcher in the Rye or something like that. Which
Creative nonfiction.
Yeah, it's creative nonfiction, but it's very much about my mental health experience, and
Right.
it's very expansive, where it does span and talk about later on in life and all these things, in my book about high school, Wales High School, and my and we'll walk into other chapters too, and it's I would say they're interdisciplinary. They're cross they span different genres, and
Right.
they're really unique in that way. They're really unique, in the sense of memoirs, in the sense of autobiographies. I like to think of the mental health memoirs or autobiographies as either some of them are written by a doctor that's working with a patient and they read very technical, or they're written by someone who experienced a mental health disorder, and they may not make quite much sense yet, because it sort of sounds like the person is maybe they're still a little confused. Maybe they started writing a little too early. So mine are somewhere in between, where I employ technical writing. I employ my social work language, so a person that's a professional could read it and say, okay, this is exactly what's going on clinically. But for a layman who's reading it, it reads like a novel. So someone could really enjoy the story, you know. So I try to make it as accessible as possible, because something I believe in is accessibility, in mental health care, in treatment, and on a systems level. People need to access information, and the more people that know about what's going on with people with schizophrenia, the better it'll be for us and the world. You know, um, yeah,
That's well, as I said, I've written 6 novels, but those are basically, I call them future fantasies. They aren't science fiction because I was an English major. So I
me,
say they aren't science fiction because I'm not a scientist. But recently, well, in the last 2 years, I wrote a book about I well. I took a course called One Short Book, and the idea was like to publish a short book at Amazon. So
mhm,
I wrote like a memoir of like what happened at Dartmouth when I had my psychotic break in the summer of '75, and I was very pleased with it. But it ended with my admission to my first hospital. Yes,
yeah,
so my editor said, you can't leave people at the bottom of the pit. This is like a good story. This is like a good first half of your book, but you
yeah,
still got a new book. You got another book to write about the second half and how I got out of schizophrenia and everything. So that's
yeah.
going to be befuddling me, but ultimately, I will get it done. I think that, you know, sometimes I feel like it's my calling or my duty to try to become the spokesperson for the people, for the schizophrenics who can't express themselves, and that's really what I want to do with my coaching, and that's why I really like have this show, and I'm so public about my illness and my journey, is because I want to show people, I mean, there's such a negative perception of schizophrenia, and admittedly, some people are violent, but that's usually like because of paranoid symptoms rather than they're violent naturally, and
Yeah.
so
Well,
that's
that's a great mission, and it's so important, because either there's a negative perception or no perception. Sometimes people don't even know what schizophrenia is, or what it looks like, or any of that. And there's such a lack of understanding or awareness of who we are, and what our struggle is out there in the world, because there's so I mean, let's face it, we represent maybe 1-2% of the population, right? Tiny percent of people suffer from what we suffer from. And I can understand why that makes it even more difficult for people that already struggle with language and speech and getting the words out to really feel comfortable with doing that. They're a minority, a tiny minority, of people that already may have speech issues or perception issues and don't feel comfortable speaking. So there's a lot of adversity there, built into the process of getting the word out. And there's a lot of stuff working against people. And I think you have a noble journey, a noble message, and a noble mission, because it's vital and it's work that needs to get done. I could tell you from my own experience why I think my books aren't really more out there. People aren't more aware of them, and I think that's because people aren't interested in 1%. They don't want to know, or they just they don't know. Why know about how do you discover something you're not looking for?
Right. Well, that's the thing, and yeah, I mean, because it is such a small percentage. I meant that the number of schizophrenic of those with schizophrenia is like 1 to 2%,
Mm-hmm.
and the number of those who actually like can come back from it, and be in a position like you and I, where we're like contributing to society, and we're talking about our illness and everything,
Mm-hmm.
is like one interesting fact is that schizophrenics might be 2% of the population, but 40% of mental health dollars go to schizophrenia. I don't know if you knew.
Exactly. That's why, we may not be a lot of there may not be a lot of us, but there's certainly a reason. There's certainly a reason to get to know what's going on with us, because you know
I think we lost him for a second. Hopefully he'll be back. Let me just see what's going on. There we go. I think he's coming. There we go. Okay.
Hi Dale. Sorry about that. Looks like there was an
There, you're
internet issue.
back.
I'm back. Yeah, no, it's
Oh, yeah,
vital, like you were
you're back.
saying. Yes, like I think the money goes to us because the government and the powers that be and the people that know what's going on know what's going to happen if people like us don't get the help we need. More hospitalizations.
Right.
You have 15, I can have 20, as opposed to someone with anxiety who was 1, 2, 3 hospitalizations. So there's a
Well,
reason.
that's the thing. I mean, to break the cycle of just to break out of the cycle of schizophrenia, and to like get to a point where you're staying out of the hospital, and I mean, I've been very lucky. I got like very good help, and I've been in my own apartment for 41 years, and
Oh wow.
you know, I graduated from college magna cum laude. After I got sick, and I've done like all these things, but the illness is something that I always have to be aware of, and
Yes.
as I get more successful and I get into more things, then that's becoming less urgent to like dwell on my sickness, because I mean, it used to be I would get out of the hospital and I like keep track of how many days I was in the hospital, and that's like negative thinking, because you're heading back. It basically means you're heading back to the hospital at some point. And
Right.
when I liberated myself from these thoughts of I'm always going to be stymied or whatever by this illness, that was like a major step in my recovery.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, we should always, I think, like you said, always have idea that you may need help or accommodation or self-care, uh, there, but it shouldn't be the focus. Illness should never ever be the focus in anyone's life. You know what I mean? Sure, you need to keep in mind what you need to do for yourself to manage or heal, but even like the cut on the wrist, this schizophrenia, you should always be thinking about that cut all day long and wherever you go, right? No, you put on a band-aid, you move it along. You get the supported housing you need, or the case manager or the service, and you live your life like someone who's living a life, because we're not walking diagnoses, we're walking humans. And
Well,
and yes.
that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. Is that for in my own case, for a long time, my diagnosis was my identity,
Yeah.
and that's really so basically I don't even think in terms of schizophrenia anymore, even though I take my medication and everything. But that if I had diabetes, I'd have to take my insulin every day. So, but but ultimately, the fact is that if you got to break out of that point where your illness or your diagnosis is your identity, and say, instead of saying I'm a schizophrenic, saying I'm a person who has schizophrenia.
Right.
And that might seem like a little semantic tweak, but it's very significant because
Yes.
you aren't like identifying yourself with your illness. And
Yes.
identity is like the most important thing. And so to break out of the habit of and establish a new identity where you say, I'm going to be successful. Forget this illness. It's not going to hold me back anymore. It held me back for 40 years. So,
Yeah.
I'm ready to flourish and to really make a life for myself, because that's what everybody wants to do. And I might be a little late. I started a career in financial planning about a year ago, and they call me Benjamin Buttons in the company because I'm doing everything backwards. I said I retired for 46 years and now I'm beginning my career.
It's funny. That's great. Really
But
great.
this question of identity, I think, is like really like essential and fundamental to recovery, and to building a life for yourself that's
Hmm.
not debilitated.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
I mean, did you experience the same thing where you found your identity was being defined by your illness or not?
Never. And I know that exists, and I know that's a thing for a lot of people that struggle with that. I'm a schizophrenic, and they don't understand. No, you're a person with schizophrenia. But I thank God I had a great family, and people gonna say, what does family have to do with it? Well, I grew up with a sick uncle who had schizophrenia, and an aunt, and I never met my uncle. He lived 20 minutes away, and I never saw him until he died and passed away. I met my aunt once. She came over. She was only able to come over once, and she lived 20 minutes away too. And we're a close knit small family. So that's not something else. What's with that? It's because they were too sick to and to leave their dwellings, their residences. And at that point,
Right.
since this was like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they didn't have the medication and treatment and support systems that are available now. So my family um was very aware of that. And when I was first hospitalized as an adolescent, they saw that maybe it's moving in that direction, or maybe he might get his situation might get worse in his clinical picture, whatever. They said, Max, they never stopped pushing me to be who I the person I thought I was when I was growing up. When I was growing
Right.
up, I was student council president in middle school. I was very collegiate bound in high school. Although I got sick, I applied to college from inpatient in New York Presbyterian. So I said, oh, I'm not not going to college. I did finish my applications and inpatient. They went off when I was discharged, and I was in SUNY Binghamton. 6 months later after I graduated and started college normally. And I would never, ever, ever, because I knew what mental illness looked like. Really, real mental illness, where people aren't getting the help they need, and the systems, f them over for lack of yeah. I knew what happened to my uncle, and I didn't want to be my uncle. I loved the idea of an uncle, sure, but I didn't want to follow in his footsteps. I wanted a better life for myself. I wanted a life that wasn't gonna result in me living in an adult home for the rest of my life. I wanted a family. I wanted to be me. I wanted to be the person I thought I would be growing up, who had no idea what mental illness was. When I had my break, I just continue on with that mentality. I'm going back to grad school. What are you talking about? Of course I'm going back. My parents were like, "You sure, Max? You sure you don't want to rest more?" I'm going back. And I did a year later. A year later, I was back in grad school, the same one that had me arrested. When I was sick, and I was walking amongst the same teachers that rejected me, and it felt great. And later on, when I came back to Westchester and started doing home visits, I visited the same residence where my uncle lived and died. I walked into that building. I said, "Oh my God, this is where Uncle Milty lived," and this is where he died. And here I am, walking in there as a professional, dead set on making sure that the people I served never let it come to that. No early deaths, no deaths from neglect, because a lot of people like us that don't get the help we need are neglected in adult homes. People die because they don't get the help they need. No one gives a shit about them. That's just how it is. And I didn't want that to happen to anyone I helped. So that's sort of the motivation and drive where I never became that person or adopted that mentality or internalized it. It wasn't going to happen, and it'll never happen.
So we're winding down, Max, but I just want to ask like one final question, which
Please.
I'd like to hear your opinion. But I mean, like since I've been doing podcasts and getting out and exposing myself to, and being the voice of schizophrenia and an unofficial voice of schizophrenia, people say, your story is so inspiring. It's like, you're so filled with courage and to get out and everything. And I've never like really seen it that way. I mean, I've never like really given myself credit for. I mean, to a degree I have, but I've never really given myself credit for like the beauty and the magnificence of the way I've overcome schizophrenia. Do you? And this my question is, what about you? How do you perceive your recovery and everything? I mean, do you see it as like uh, like a magnificent struggle that you've overcome, or do you just see it as like something you had to do to like become the person you wanted to become?
All of that, like one, the enormity of what I was up against. I do recognize that, from they call it the social determinants of mental health, all the stuff that was working against me outside of my illness, to the enormity of the condition itself. I do recognize that. Yes, I was up against a lot. I overcame a lot. Now, do I endorse myself for every one of my accomplishments, or understand that we represent a small fraction of the community of people that are able to do what I've done? I don't know about that, and I don't think so. I don't give myself enough credit. I give myself a lot of credit in some areas of my life, but I don't think I give myself enough credit, and I don't think anyone really gives themselves enough credit in their life for all their accomplishments, and everything that they've done. And I think people would be a lot happier and a lot more content and feel a lot better about themselves if they said, "Yeah, I'm good at that. Yeah, I did that well. Yeah," and endorse yourself. Give yourself credit for what you do and all the great things and all your achievements, because people are a lot more unique and spectacular than I think they are sometimes.
Well, that's the thing. If you give yourself credit, then people call you a narcissist. You know, I
That's
mean,
the thing. Well, yeah,
that's a
there.
catch-22.
It's a catch 22 for some people that don't understand what a real narcissist is. Okay, a real narcissist is hateful in the sense that they seek, they won't hesitate to hurt you in the process of loving themselves. I love myself, but I also love you, and I love my friend, and I love them, and I need to take good care of myself, and I need to love myself, because loving myself and self care is the only way I'm going to survive with such a enormous task ahead of me. But I won't hurt you in the process, Dale, and I won't hurt you, Sally, and I won't hurt you, Bill, and I love you enough and care enough about you where I'm not going to put myself ahead of you or push you, throw you under the bus just to get my medication or get that social security check. You know what I mean? I'm not going to hurt anyone in the process of taking care of myself. I understand that, that it's important to love yourself, but also love others. So I don't believe it's true narcissism. I would have to disagree with you there.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're the clinicians, Max, so you know a lot more than me. Just well, our time is basically up, but I just want to say thank you very much, Matt, and hold on, so we can debrief after.
Sure. It was
After.
a real
But
pleasure being here today. Thank you.
I just want to say, I think you have incredible insight. I really admire you. I mean, coming from someone who's been in the situation, and I know how much you've overcome, and it's pretty amazing. And it's pretty amazing to have someone to talk to that, And so, how can people get in touch with you? How do you like?
Email
I
me.
mean, if
Email me. Sure, anyone can email me. Maxwell, Maxwell, Guttman, Guttman at gmail.com. I think even if you look me up, you type in my name here, there'll be various ways, Google it, various ways of accessing me. Email. I think my business line phone number is out there too for Recovery Now, my business. There are a lot of ways of getting in touch with me. Anyone who searches me can find me. They always do. They always do, Dale.
And I take it, is it so exclusively in person, or do you people have remote like sessions and working with you?
Right now, it's all remote right now because we're still working under the framework of the pandemic. I did have an office for a while, but I had to close it because of COVID. But everything is teletherapy right now. I plan on hopefully having an office again in the future, but right now my office is here, so I do all my work as telemental health right now. But
Well,
if
that's
you want to
good.
see me in the community, I'll have coffee with you. I'm not afraid.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Max, and thank you everybody for attending who's been watching, and I hope you found this enlightening and insightful, and it's just like so refreshing to have someone who has overcome come from the other side of schizophrenia and insanity to show himself to show the possibilities for recovery, and as I say, recovery is always an option. So keep that in mind. And I hope we all help and have a good day and take care.
Take care.